The Allen family, Washington's most prominent dynasty, saw their heir Anthony Allen accidentally poisoned, and he mistook me for the antidote. A month later, during my medical checkup, I discovered I was pregnant. When Anthony learned about this, he offered me $50 million to carry the child to term, plus an additional $10 million to purchase custody rights. However, my sanctimonious friend Eleanor Davis urged me to terminate the pregnancy. She said, "Money means nothing, it's just material wealth. If you ruin your reputation for $60 million, how are you any different from those escort girls in bars?" In my previous life, I listened to Eleanor and underwent the procedure. I even took Anthony to court, charging him with assault. Later, when my parents fell seriously ill, I turned to Eleanor for financial help. She slapped me hard across the face and said, "As my best friend, your parents are sick and you come begging to me? How shameless." Eleanor cut ties with me on the spot, and the court ultimately ruled against me. In the end, without money for treatment, my parents died in agony, devastated by losing them. I jumped from a rooftop. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day Eleanor convinced me to have the abortion. Eleanor shouted at me, "Natalie, if you take this money, how are you any different from a prostitute? These wealthy men love toying with young girls. If you agree to this, you're helping evil people do evil things. You won't take his money, right?" Natalie Morris, that's my name. I stared wide-eyed at Eleanor, her face flushed red with anger in front of her spaghetti. Then I looked at Anthony standing nearby, holding a $50 million check. That's when it hit me, I had been reborn. I was back on the day I discovered my pregnancy. Seeing my silence, Eleanor grew visibly anxious. She took my arm and patiently urged, "Money means nothing, it's just material wealth. If you ruin your reputation for a mere $50 million, how are you any different from those escort girls in bars? This child absolutely cannot stay. It's nothing but trouble that will ruin your entire life. We may be poor, but poor people have dignity too. We must never bow down to evil." Eleanor straightened her back, her eyes resolute, as if she were the embodiment of justice. But looking at her performance, I felt nothing but disgust. This time, I wouldn't let her have her way. I coldly withdrew my hand and naturally took the check from Anthony. I said, "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone about this. Once the child is born, I'll hand it over to you." My family was poor since school. If not for my good grades earning me scholarships, I couldn't have afforded education at all. Now that I was already pregnant, what was the point of being pretentious? That was $50 million. I could work my entire life and never earn that much. Anyone who wouldn't want this money would be a fool. After hearing my words, Anthony seemed relieved, but Eleanor, standing beside us, went crazy and demanded, "Natalie, what are you thinking? How can you agree to carry this child? What you should do is come with me to the police station to file a report, then terminate the pregnancy. You need to make these bad people pay the price they deserve." Listening to her ranting, I found it incredibly annoying. I said, "My parents are still hauling bricks at construction sites. My family is extremely poor. One child can bring $50 million. Why wouldn't I make that trade?" Eleanor's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at me. She said, "Noble people love money too, but they earn it through legal, proper means. If your parents knew about this, they'd be ashamed of you and disown you as their daughter. Not only that, you'll corrupt society's moral fabric. No matter how poor we are, we must never sell our souls." This time, her seemingly reasonable words wouldn't fool me anymore. I smiled as I put the check in my bag, then said coldly, "That's none of your concern. If I had taken this check in my previous life, I wouldn't have ended up losing my loved ones and living in misery. In this life, I wouldn't be so foolish as to let her manipulate me again." After Anthony handed me the $50 million check, he added, "Once you give birth to the child, I'll transfer the remaining $10 million to your bank account." I nodded readily. Rich people sure are straightforward. In my past life, I listened to Eleanor's advice and spread this matter far and wide. Everyone was talking about it, and we even took Anthony to court as a result. Because there was evidence that he had lost his rationality after being drugged, Anthony didn't go to prison. Instead, I ended up spending all of my family's meager savings on legal fees. So much so that later, when my parents fell ill, I couldn't come up with a single cent. Upon hearing Anthony's words, Eleanor crossed her arms. She said disdainfully, "Anthony, let me tell you something. Don't think that just because you're the heir to the Allen family, Washington's most prominent family, us poor people will bow down to you." Natalie is just confused for the moment. As long as I'm by her side watching over her, I can definitely guide her back to the right path. Listening to her seemingly righteous words, I found them utterly ridiculous. If I hadn't witnessed her disgusting behavior of sucking up to rich people after my death in my previous life, I might have still believed her words. Anthony knew we had taken a taxi here, so he offered to give us a ride. I was about to readily agree when Eleanor started her act again. She said, "Even though our family is poor and can't afford a car, we're people with dignity. We absolutely will not ride in you rich people's cars." Eleanor lifted her chin slightly, her eyes filled with self-righteous arrogance. She continued, "Don't think that having money means you can do whatever you want. We poor people have dignity too." As soon as Eleanor finished speaking, I said impatiently, "All right. Thank you, Mr. Allen. It's too late now to catch a taxi easily. Please give me a ride home. Taking a taxi would cost money. Besides, I've never ridden in a Rolls-Royce in my entire life. What's wrong with experiencing it once?" Hearing my words, Eleanor grabbed my arm forcefully. She said, "Natalie, what are you saying? We may be poor, but we need to have dignity. Are you really going to be dazzled by a luxury car so easily?" Looking at her expression of heartbreak and anxiety for me, I felt nauseated. At this point, Anthony had already opened the car door for me. I flashed Eleanor a brilliant smile and said, "Yes, I am dazzled by the luxury car. So I'll take the luxury car and leave first." With that, I got into the car, through the car window. Eleanor looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. She asked pitifully, "Natalie, are you going to leave me here all alone? What am I supposed to do?" I glanced at her coldly. "Don't you have dignity?" Seeing Eleanor reach for the car door handle, I quickly added, "You absolutely must not get in the car. If you get in the luxury car, you'll lose your dignity." Eleanor was speechless, her face looking terrible. Anthony instructed the driver, "Let's go." Through the car's rearview mirror, I watched Eleanor standing alone in the cold wind, looking like a fool being blown around. When I got out of the car, Anthony, concerned about the child in my belly, even helped steady me. After getting out, I turned around and went straight upstairs. The first thing I did after getting upstairs was to look at what Anthony's check looked like. I'd never seen a check in my life, but as soon as I got home, I discovered the check was missing. I searched through my bag for a long time but couldn't find the check. Suddenly, I remembered that Eleanor had touched my bag before I left. I quickly called her, but her phone was turned off. I immediately went downstairs, hailed a cab, and headed straight to her apartment building. No one was home, so I had to wait outside. Before long, Eleanor came back, soaking wet. When she saw me, she immediately sneered. "I thought after riding in Mr. Allen's luxury car, you'd be so immersed in that lavish lifestyle that you'd never come back to reality. Let me tell you, Natalie, being a rich man's wife isn't as easy as you think. Hanging around with those wealthy people will only get you bullied in the end. How did I never notice you had no backbone? You'd sell your body for a little money, but lucky for you, you have me. I'll set you on the right path and show you what real dignity and integrity look like." I wasn't in the mood for her nonsense and walked straight up to her. "Is that check with you?" Eleanor's expression flickered, but she quickly regained her composure. "What check? That check wasn't meant for me. So why would it be with me?" I knew Eleanor too well. I could tell immediately she was lying. I pulled out my phone, pretending to call the police. "All right. My check is missing, probably stolen. I guess I'll report it to the police." As soon as I said that, she frantically grabbed my phone. "Why would you call the police over something so trivial? You shouldn't have taken that check in the first place. Do you know what the consequences will be? You're only hurting yourself," I scoffed. All I knew was that without this check, I'd have to watch my loved one die. I held out my hand. "Give me the check, or I'm calling the police." Eleanor's lie was exposed, but she didn't even blush. Instead, she said loudly, "Do you really think I secretly took the check for money?" I raised an eyebrow. "What else?" Eleanor deliberately put on a disappointed expression. "Natalie, I'm afraid you're going down the wrong path. Even if we're poor, we can't lose our dignity. In this life, dignity and integrity are more important than anything else. If you sell your body for money, what's the difference between you and a soulless corpse?" Before she could finish, I reached directly into her coat pocket. Eleanor frantically clutched the check, not letting me take it. "Natalie, all you care about is money. If I don't save you, you'll stay confused forever." Eleanor suddenly used force and tore the check to pieces. "Without the check, maybe your head will clear up a bit. You can't lose your moral bottom line for money." After tearing up the check, a flash of smugness crossed her eyes. She thought that by destroying the check, it'd be out of options. Unfortunately, she was wrong from that day on. Eleanor called or texted me daily, urging me to get an abortion, besides being busy trying to convince me to have the procedure. She was busy with something else. She was crafting a noble image on Instagram, specifically blocking me from seeing it. How did I know? Anthony told me and even sent me screenshots of the content. Eleanor kept telling me to stay away from Anthony. Yes, she secretly followed Anthony's Instagram account under the guise of being my good friend. After that, Eleanor's Instagram was basically filled with photos of her working hard at her job. The captions were all positive energy messages. Even if I'm poor and tired, I absolutely cannot lose my dignity. We must create our future with our own hands and never bow down to evil people. Keep going. I want to be a woman who controls her own life and is independent and strong. Anthony sent me another video security footage. In the surveillance video, Eleanor was waiting outside Anthony's company after waiting for a long time. She finally saw Anthony come downstairs. As she walked over, she twisted her ankle in her high heels and fell into Anthony's arms. Then she said in a stern tone, "Don't think you can buy me off with money just because I'm Natalie's good friend. Let me tell you, even though we're poor, we have dignity. We won't sell our dignity for money." Anthony looked at her like she was an idiot for a few seconds, then said coldly, "Security, watching this?" I burst out laughing. A week later, Anthony came to my house to see me. Eleanor somehow got wind of this and immediately rushed over to my place. The moment she walked through the door, she started shouting hysterically, spittle flying everywhere. She said, "Natalie, haven't you come to your senses yet? This child absolutely cannot be kept. He's nothing but a continuation of sin, a curse. If you keep this up, I really can't be friends with you anymore. Everyone will be ashamed of you." When I ignored her, she walked over to Anthony. She smiled and used her old trick again, leaning sideways and throwing herself into Anthony's arms. I didn't miss the smugness in her eyes. Anthony stepped aside, and Eleanor fell straight to the floor, wincing in pain, but she immediately put on a pitiful act. Looking up with tears welling in her eyes without letting them fall, she said, "Don't worry. Even though my family is poor, even though you're Anthony, I would never extort you over such a minor injury. I may be poor, but I have dignity." Anthony looked down at her with ice-cold indifference. He said, "My lawyer is very good at handling extortion cases. Would you like to try?" Eleanor's face stiffened, and she awkwardly got to her feet. Then she immediately rushed to my side, saying, "Natalie, you must never accept charity from others, otherwise you'll have no dignity left. The most important things in life are your reputation and backbone. Even if we're poor, we must have pride. I've already made you a doctor's appointment. You have to trust me." I'd heard these words too many times before. I nodded dismissively and showed her out. Over the following period, Eleanor tried every trick in the book. She kept urging me to get an abortion while simultaneously crafting her noble image in front of Anthony. One day, while I was packing, I received a call from Eleanor. She said, "Natalie, don't you realize your mistake yet? When are you going to get that abortion? I'll go with you." I replied, "No need, I'm going abroad." Hearing this, Eleanor started making wild assumptions again. She said, "I get it. You're worried about staying in America because the Allen family might come after you. So you want to go abroad for the abortion, right?" I said dismissively, "Yes." Eleanor was thrilled. "That's wonderful, Natalie. We poor people should have backbone and not be controlled by those rich folks. When you come back, I'll help you find the best lawyer and take that bastard Anthony to court." I could hear the excitement in her voice. But what she didn't know was that I was going abroad to take care of my health. Soon, with Anthony's arrangements, I left America. Abroad, aside from taking care of my health, I just ate, slept, and rested. Days passed by. I successfully gave birth to a baby girl abroad, and the $60 million was successfully transferred to my bank account. After handing the child over to the Allen family's people, I prepared to return to America to see my parents. A few days after returning to America, Anthony found me again. He said the nanny suggested that children should bond closely with their mothers from an early age. Then he took me to the mall to buy baby supplies. As we were leaving the store, I received a text from Eleanor. "Natalie, when are you coming back to America? I've already found you a lawyer. I guarantee that bastard Anthony will spend the rest of his life in prison." I ignored Eleanor, but by sheer coincidence, we ran into her right after that. She was arm in arm with a pot-bellied man, her other hand carrying several bags with designer logos. Seeing us, Eleanor looked panicked and immediately approached. Her gaze darted between me, "Anthony, And the baby stroller we were pushing. Then Eleanor rushed forward and frantically grabbed my neck, demanding, "Natalie, didn't you get an abortion? Tell me, where did this child come from?"